The mining station Epsilon 7 floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a dying red star at the edge of known territory. It was the year 2847, and humanity had spread across 3 galaxies, building cities on distant worlds and making friends with alien species that looked nothing like them. But even after all these centuries of exploration, there were still parts of the universe that remained mysterious and unknown. Danny Cole pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor, listening to the hum of the station's engines. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many disappointments. His hands were rough from years of hard work, and his back ached from bending over mops and scrub brushes. He had been working the night shift on Epsilon 7 for almost 5 years now, cleaning up after the miners who dug precious metals from the asteroids nearby. The station housed 300 workers, and Danny knew most of them by name. He knew which ones left coffee rings on the tables in the cafeteria. He knew which ones tracked mud through the hallways without thinking. He knew which ones said hello to him, and which ones looked right through him like he was not even there. Most of them fell into the second group. To them, he was just part of the furniture, as invisible as the walls and the floor tiles. Danny did not mind being invisible. It was easier that way. He had learned a long time ago that hopping for more only led to pain. 30 years ago, things had been different. 30 years ago, he had been Daniel Cole, a graduate student at the University of New Terra, studying ancient alien civilizations. He had been brilliant, his professors said. He had been destined for great things. But destiny had other plans, and now he pushed a cart full of cleaning supplies through empty hallways while the rest of the universe passed him by. The alarm started screaming at exactly 3:47 in the morning, station time. Danny stopped his cart and looked up at the flashing red lights on the ceiling. Emergency alarms were not unusual on a mining station. Equipment broke down. Airlocks malfunctioned. Miners got careless with explosives. But something about this alarm felt different. The tone was sharper, more urgent, like the station itself was afraid. He made his way to the nearest window and looked outside. At first, he could not understand what he was seeing. There was something out there in the darkness, something enormous. It looked almost like a creature, but that was impossible. No living thing could survive in the vacuum of space. No living thing could be that size. The thing was at least 2 kilometers long, with a body that seemed to glow faintly from within. It had wings, or something that looked like wings, made of shimmering energy that rippled and flowed like water. Its shape reminded Danny of the dragons from old Earth stories, the ones his grandmother used to tell him about when he was a child. But this was no fairy tale. This was real, and it was heading straight for the station. Danny ran. He ran through the corridors, past confused workers who had stumbled out of their rooms in their sleeping clothes, past security officers who were shouting into their communicators, past scientists who stood frozen in shock. He ran until he reached the observation deck, where a crowd had already gathered to stare at the impossible thing outside. Commander Lisa Vance was there, barking orders at her crew. She was a tall woman with short black hair and a face that never showed fear, even when fear was the only sensible response. She had served in the Space Corps for 20 years before taking command of Epsilon 7, and she had seen things that would break most people. But even she looked shaken as she watched the creature approach. "All stations report," she said into her communicator. "I want every weapon we have online and ready to fire. Evacuate non-essential personnel to the emergency shuttles. Move." "Commander," one of the scientists called out, "we are receiving a transmission." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the main as it flickered to life. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Danny had ever heard. It was old, impossibly old, like the sound of mountains crumbling or stars burning out. It was filled with pain and exhaustion, but also with something that might have been hope. "I seek the one who knows my name," the voice said. "Bring me the human who recognizes the eternal." Commander Vance frowned. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Run that name through the database. I want to know everything we have on record." The scientists went to work, their fingers flying across computer screens. Minutes passed. The creature outside continued to drift closer, its light growing dimmer with each passing moment. "Nothing, Commander," one of the scientists reported. "There is no match in any of our records. Galactic archives have no information on anything called or anything similar. Whatever this thing is, we have never encountered it before." "Try the ancient history databases," Vance ordered. "Archaeological records, anything." More searching, more nothing. Danny stood at the back of the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. His mouth had gone dry and his hands were shaking. He knew that name. He knew exactly what it meant. For 30 years he had tried to forget. He had buried his research, his dreams, his failures, deep in the back of his mind where they could not hurt him anymore. He had accepted that he would spend the rest of his life as a nobody, cleaning floors and emptying trash cans until the day he died. But now, standing on the observation deck of a mining station at the edge of nowhere, watching an ancient dragon drift through the void, Danny Cole realized that the universe was not done with him yet. The Eternal, the keeper of dying lights, the guardian who watched over stars as they burned out. Danny had read that name on a crystal tablet recovered from a dead world 800 million years old. He had spent 3 years translating the ancient text, 3 years trying to understand what it meant. And when he had finally published his findings, the academic world had laughed in his face. They had called him a fool. They had called him a fraud. They had destroyed his career and sent him spiraling into obscurity. But he had been right. Danny pushed his way through the crowd, past the miners and scientists and security officers who barely noticed him. He was just the janitor after all. Nobody paid attention to the janitor. He reached the front of the room and stopped in front of Commander Vance. "I know the name," he said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but in the silence of the observation deck, everyone heard him. Vance turned to look at him, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Who are you?" Danny took a deep breath and stood up a little. "My name is Danny Cole," he said. "I am the night janitor, and I know who is." Commander Vance looked at Danny like he had lost his mind. The security officers behind her reached for their weapons, ready to drag this crazy janitor out of the command center. But Danny did not move. He stood his ground and met the commander's eyes without flinching. "You expect me to believe," Vance said slowly, "that the night janitor knows something about this creature that our entire scientific database cannot find." "I do not expect you to believe anything," Danny replied. "But that thing out there is dying. You can see it. Its light is fading, and it came here looking for someone who knows its name. I am that someone. You can either let me help or you can watch it die without ever knowing what it wanted." Vance stared at him for a long moment. Outside the window, the great dragon drifted closer, its massive wings growing dimmer by the second. Time was running out. "Talk," Vance said finally. "Tell me everything." Danny took a deep breath and began to speak. 30 years ago, he had been a different person. He had been young and full of hope, a graduate student at the University of New Terra studying. His specialty was ancient civilizations, the ones that had risen and fallen long before humanity ever crawled out of the mud. He had dreamed of making discoveries that would change the way people understood the universe. His professor had been a man named Henry Shaw, one of the most respected scholars in the field. Professor Shaw had taken Danny under his wing, had seen potential in him that others had missed. Together, they had worked on a collection of artifacts recovered from a dead planet called Prime. The planet had been lifeless for 800 million years. Whatever civilization had built those artifacts was gone, erased by time and entropy. But they had left something behind, a single crystal tablet covered in strange markings that no one could read. Danny had become obsessed with that tablet. He had spent 3 years studying it, developing new translation methods, comparing the symbols to every known ancient language in the galactic archives. Slowly, painfully, he had begun to piece together its meaning. The tablet told the story of beings called They were not gods, the text said, but guardians. They had been born at the beginning of time, created from the raw energy of the young universe. They had watched the first stars come to life. They had seen galaxies form and grow. They had protected the spark of life wherever it appeared, nurturing young civilizations as they took their first steps toward the stars. The tablet named several of these guardians, and among them was the Eternal. According to the text, was the keeper of dying lights. His purpose was to watch over stars as they reached the end of their lives, to guide them gently into darkness. He was the oldest of his kind, the last remaining guardian in a universe that had grown old and cold. Danny had been thrilled by his discovery. He had written papers and given presentations. He had believed that his research would change everything, that people would finally understand there were beings in the universe far older and wiser than humanity. He had been wrong. The academic community had not welcomed his findings. They had mocked them. Professor Shaw, the man Danny had trusted most, had called his translation methods flawed and his conclusions ridiculous. Other scholars had piled on, accusing him of making up stories to get attention. Review boards had rejected his papers. Funding committees had cut off his money. Within a year, Danny had gone from promising young scholar to academic joke. He had tried to fight back at first. He had gathered more evidence, refined his arguments, begged for another chance to prove himself. But no one would listen. The doors that had once been open to him slammed shut one by one. Eventually, he had given up. He had left the university with nothing but a useless degree and a broken heart. He had drifted from job to job, taking whatever work he could find to pay the bills. He had ended up on Epsilon 7, pushing a cleaning cart through empty hallways, trying to forget that he had ever dreamed of something more. But he had never forgotten he had never forgotten. Deep in his heart, in a place he did not like to visit, he had always believed that his research was correct. He had just never expected to be proven right like this. "That is quite a story," Commander Vance said when Danny finished speaking. Her voice was skeptical, but her eyes were thoughtful. "You are telling me that thing out there is some kind of ancient space guardian from before the dawn of time?" "I am telling you what the tablet said," Danny replied. "Whether you believe it or not is up to you." Vance turned to look at the dragon was very close now, its massive form filling the entire frame. She could see the pain in its eyes, the exhaustion in every movement. Whatever this creature was, it was clearly at the end of its life. "Commander," one of the scientists spoke up, "I have been running some scans on the creature. Its energy signature is unlike anything in our records. The readings suggest it is incredibly old. We are talking hundreds of millions of years at minimum, maybe longer." Vance was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. "All right, Janitor," she said. "You want to talk to this thing, let us see what happens." She led Danny to the communications console and showed him how to use it. His hands were shaking as he reached for the controls. This was the moment he had been waiting for his entire life, the chance to prove that he had not wasted 30 years believing in something that did not exist. He opened a channel to the creature outside. "The Eternal," Danny said, his voice trembling but clear. "Keeper of dying lights, guardian of I know your name. I have known it for 30 years." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Danny could feel everyone in the room holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Then the ancient voice came through the speakers again, and this time it was filled with wonder. "You speak the old words," said. "After all this time, after all these centuries of waiting, you speak the old words. Tell me, human, how do you know what I am?" Danny felt tears forming in his eyes. He was not crazy. He had never been crazy. They were real, and one of them was talking to him. "I studied the tablet from your home world," Danny said. "I translated the ancient texts. I wrote about your people, about what they did, about who they were. No one believed me. They called me a fool and a liar. But I never stopped believing in you. I never stopped hoping that someday I would be proven right. The dragon's eyes, visible through seemed to glow a little brighter. Then you are the one I have been searching for, said. Come to me, Daniel Cole. We have much to discuss, and I do not have much time left. Before Danny could respond, a golden light surrounded him. He felt his body dissolving, breaking apart into millions of tiny particles that scattered into the void. There was no pain, only a strange warmth that spread through every part of him. The last thing he saw before the observation deck disappeared was Commander Vance reaching out toward him, her mouth open in a shout that he could not hear. Then everything went dark. When Danny opened his eyes again, he was somewhere else entirely. He was standing in a chamber made of living crystal, surrounded by walls that pulsed with soft light. Through the transparent surface, he could see stars everywhere, millions of them, stretching out in every direction like diamonds scattered across black velvet. They seemed close enough to touch. And there in front of him lay. The creature was even more magnificent up close. Its body stretched across the chamber, scales of deep blue and silver shimmering with inner light. Its wings were folded against its sides, but Danny could see the energy flowing through them like rivers of gold. Its eyes were like twin suns, burning with an intelligence that made Danny feel very small and very young. But the dragon was dying. Danny could see that clearly now. The light in its scales was fading. The energy in its wings was flickering. Every breath it took seemed to cost it tremendous effort. Do not be afraid, said. Its voice was gentler now, more intimate, like a grandfather speaking to a beloved child. I mean you no harm. I brought you here because I need to speak with you, and I do not have much time left. Danny found his voice. What is this place? This is my heart, the dragon replied. The core of my being where my consciousness lives. When my body fades, this place will fade with it. But for now, it is safe. For now, we can talk. Danny took a step forward, then another. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to keep moving until he was standing directly in front of the great creature's face. Up close, he could see the age in those burning eyes, the weight of countless centuries pressing down on them. Why me? Danny asked. Of all the humans in the universe, why did you come looking for me? Let out a sound that might have been a laugh, though it was tinged with sadness. Because you are the only one who remembered us. For 800 million years, we watched over this universe. We guided the growth of galaxies. We protected the spark of life wherever it appeared. We thought we were making a difference. We thought we mattered. The dragon's eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened again, they were filled with pain. But time erases all things, even guardians. One by one, my brothers and sisters faded into the void. Their names were forgotten. Their deeds were lost. The civilizations we protected grew old and died, and new civilizations rose that knew nothing of us. We became legends, then myths, then nothing at all. Danny thought about his own life, about the years he had spent in obscurity, forgotten by a world that had once seemed so full of promise. He understood what it meant to be erased. I was the last, continued. I stayed because I could not let go. I kept watch over the dying stars, guiding them to their rest, even when there was no one left to thank me. I told myself that it mattered, that the work was important even if no one knew I was doing it. But deep down I was afraid of being forgotten completely, afraid of fading into nothing without anyone even knowing I had existed. The dragon turned its great head to look directly at Danny. Then I found your work, your research on the tablet from Prime. I saw that someone, after all these centuries, had taken the time to learn our language, to understand our history, to speak our names. You gave us something we thought we had lost forever. You gave us memory. Danny felt tears running down his cheeks. He did not try to stop them. They laughed at me, he said. They called me a fool. They destroyed my career over that research. I know, said gently. I watched it happen. I saw how they treated you and it broke my heart. You gave everything to preserve our memory and you were punished for it. That is why I came. I could not let you spend the rest of your life thinking you were wrong. You deserve to know the truth." Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "The truth is that you are real. They existed. Everything I wrote was correct." "Yes," the dragon said. "Everything you wrote was correct. And more than that, everything you believed was important. Memory matters, Daniel Cole. Names matter. The simple act of remembering someone, of speaking their name, of acknowledging that they existed, that is the closest thing to immortality that any being can achieve." Danny was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the beginning. "What happens now? What do you want from me?" Shifted its massive body, and Danny could see how much effort even that small movement required. "I am dying," the dragon said. "There is no stopping it. My time in this universe is coming to an end. But before I go, I want to give you something. A gift to repay you for what you gave us." "I do not need any gift," Danny said. "Knowing that I was right is enough." "Perhaps," said, "but this gift is not just for you. It is for your entire species. It is for all the young civilizations that are still finding their way in the universe. They spent 800 million years learning about reality. We discovered secrets about energy and matter, about space and time, about life and death. We recorded everything in an archive hidden in a distant star system. I want to give you the location of that archive." Danny's heart stopped. "You are talking about 800 million years of knowledge," he said slowly. "Scientific discoveries, historical records, technology that humanity cannot even imagine." "Yes," said, "everything we learned, everything we created, everything we were. It is all there, waiting for someone to find it. And now I am giving the key to you, Daniel Cole, the janitor who remembered us when no one else would." The dragon's eyes began to glow brighter, and Danny felt information flooding into his mind. Coordinates, access codes, star maps, fragments of knowledge that would take a lifetime to fully understand. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink an ocean through a straw. "This is too much," Danny gasped. "I cannot handle all of this." "You do not have to handle it alone," said. "Share it with your people. Let them help you understand it. That is why I am giving it to you. Not because you are special, but because you are kind. Because you cared enough to remember beings you had never met. Because you did not give up even when everyone told you to." Danny fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what he was receiving. The dragon watched him with ancient, compassionate eyes. "Why me?" Danny asked again, though this time the question meant something different. "Why not give this to a scientist or a leader, someone important?" Made that laughing sound again, warmer this time. "You think you are not important," the dragon said. "You think you are just a janitor, a nobody, a man who failed at everything he tried. But you are wrong, Daniel Cole. You are the most important human I have ever met, because you are the one who remembered." Danny stayed on his knees for a long time, trying to make sense of everything that was happening. The information had given him swirled through his mind like a storm, fragments of knowledge and memory that he could barely begin to understand. Star maps showing systems he had never heard of, scientific formulas that looked like magic, historical records of civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun had even started burning. It was too much, it was far too much, and yet somehow it was also exactly right. "Tell me about your people," Danny said finally, looking up at the great dragon. "Tell me about I want to know everything." Settled its massive body more comfortably, and despite its obvious pain, there was something like joy in its ancient eyes. It had been waiting a very long time to tell this story. "We were born in the first moments of creation," the dragon began. "When the universe was young and wild before the stars had learned to shine. We came from the chaos, shaped by forces that no longer exist. There were thousands of us at first, beings of pure energy, without form or purpose. We drifted through the void, watching as reality took shape around us. Danny listened, captivated. This was the story he had spent his whole career trying to piece together from fragments and ruins. Now he was hearing it from the source. In time, we discovered that we had a gift, continued. We could feel the pulse of the universe, the rhythm of creation and destruction that drives all things. We could sense when new stars were about to be born, when planets were ready to support life, when civilizations were on the verge of great change. And we realized that we could help, we could guide, we could protect. The dragon's voice grew softer, touched with sadness. We thought we knew best. We were ancient and powerful, and the young species we watched over seemed so small and fragile. We interfered constantly, pushing them in directions we thought were good, preventing disasters we thought they could not survive. We meant well. We truly did, but we made terrible mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Danny asked. We made some civilizations dependent on us. They stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped reaching for the stars because they knew we would always be there to catch them when they fell. When we finally stepped back, they did not know how to survive on their own. They withered and died, and it was our fault. Closed its eyes, and Danny could see the weight of guilt pressing down on the ancient creature. We learned from that. We learned to be patient, to trust the universe to find its own path. We stopped interfering directly and simply watched, offering guidance only when it was truly needed. Some of my brothers and sisters thought we had become too passive, too distant. Others thought we had finally found wisdom. We argued about it for millions of years. The dragon opened its eyes again and looked at Danny with an expression that was almost human. But we never stopped caring. Even when we disagreed about methods, we never stopped wanting the young species to succeed. That was always our purpose. That was always our hope. Danny thought about humanity, about all the mistakes his own species had made over the centuries. The wars, the cruelty, the times when they had thought they knew best and had been proven terribly wrong. Perhaps all intelligent beings followed a similar path. What happened to the others? Danny asked. Your brothers and sisters. Time said simply. Nothing lasts forever, not even guardians. One by one, they grew tired. One by one, they chose to let go, to release their energy back into the universe. Some of them found peace in that release. Others fought it until the very end. But eventually, they all faded. I am the last. Why did you stay? The dragon was quiet for a long moment before answering. Because I was afraid, it admitted. Afraid of the void, afraid of being forgotten, afraid that everything we had done, everything we had tried to build, would mean nothing once we were gone. So I kept working. I kept watching over the dying stars, guiding them to their rest, telling myself that the work was important even if no one knew I was doing it. Danny understood that feeling all too well. He had spent 30 years doing invisible work, cleaning floors and emptying bins, telling himself that someone had to do it even if no one noticed. There was a strange comfort in being needed, even if you were never thanked. But I was wrong, continued. The work is not what matters. The memory is what matters. The names, the stories, the simple acknowledgement that someone existed and tried to make a difference. That is the true legacy. That is the only immortality any of us can hope for. The dragon turned its great head to look directly at Danny. That is why I came to find you, Daniel Cole. Not because I needed someone to carry on my work. Not because I needed someone to save me. I came because I needed someone to remember. And you had already done that 30 years ago when you translated that tablet and spoke our names for the first time in 800 million years. Danny felt tears in his eyes again. He had spent so long thinking of himself as a failure, as someone who had wasted his potential and accomplished nothing. He had never imagined that his abandoned research had meant anything to anyone. The archive I am giving you contains everything we learned, said. Scientific knowledge that will take your species centuries to fully understand. Historical records of civilizations you have never heard of. Technology that will seem like magic, but more than that, it contains our stories. The names of every who ever lived. The record of what we tried to do and why we tried to do it. The dragon's light was fading faster now. Danny could see the end approaching. Share it freely, said. Do not let any single group control it. Do not let it become a weapon or a tool for gaining power over others. It belongs to everyone, to every species in every galaxy, to every child who ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Danny nodded, not trusting his voice. And tell them about us, the dragon added, its voice growing weaker. Tell them about the guardians who watched over the universe for 800 million years. Tell them that we cared, that we tried, that we hoped they would become something wonderful. Tell them that they are not alone, that they never were, that the universe has always been full of beings who wanted them to succeed. I will, Danny promised. I will tell everyone. Smiled, or at least made a movement that felt like a smile. I know you will, the dragon said. That is why I chose you. Not because you are powerful or famous or important by the standards of your society. I chose you because you are kind, and kind people keep their promises. The light in the dragon's eyes was almost gone now. Danny reached out and placed his hand on the great creature's face, feeling the warmth of ancient energy beneath his fingers. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. Thank you, replied, for remembering. And then the light went out. Danny opened his eyes and found himself back on the observation deck of Epsilon 7. Commander Vance was standing in front of him, her hand still reaching out toward the spot where he had been standing a moment ago. The other crew members were frozen in various poses of shock and confusion. Then time seemed to catch up with itself, and everyone started moving and shouting at once. What happened? Vance demanded, grabbing Danny by the shoulders. You disappeared. You just dissolved into light and vanished. Where did you go? What did that thing do to you? Danny looked past her toward the window. The great dragon was gone. In its place, streams of golden light were flowing outward in every direction, scattering across the cosmos like seeds carried by the wind. The Eternal had finally found peace. It is over, Danny said quietly. He is gone. Vance stared at him for a long moment, then released his shoulders and took a step back. Her face was a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. You were gone for almost an hour, she said. The sensors showed you inside that creature, but we could not establish communication. What happened in there? Danny took a deep breath and began to explain. He told Vance everything, about thee and their 800 million year vigil, about and his search for someone who remembered, about the archive hidden in a distant star system, and the key that now lived inside Danny's mind. The commander listened without interrupting, her expression growing more and more thoughtful as the story went on. When Danny finished, the observation deck was silent. Everyone was staring at him with wide eyes. That is either the most incredible thing I have ever heard, Vance said finally, or you have completely lost your mind. Danny smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first one he had worn in a very long time. Only one way to find out, he said. Send a ship to these coordinates, see what is there. Vance looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, she said. Let us see what your dragon friend left behind. 3 months later, an exploration vessel reached the star system had revealed. It was an unremarkable place, a dim orange star orbited by a handful of rocky planets that had never attracted any attention from human surveyors. But beneath the surface of the fourth planet, exactly where Danny had said it would be, they found the archive. It was vast beyond imagination. Thousands of chambers carved from crystal, filled with storage devices containing more information than humanity had produced in its entire history. Scientific formulas that explained mysteries human scientists had puzzled over for centuries. Historical records of civilizations that had risen and fallen in distant galaxies. Technology that seemed impossible, that everything humans thought they knew about physics and reality. And stories, thousands upon thousands of stories, the names and deeds of every who had ever lived, the record of 800 million years of watching and hopping and trying to make a difference. Danny Cole became famous overnight. News of the discovery spread across 3 galaxies, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about the janitor who had talked to an ancient dragon. Universities that had rejected his research 30 years ago now begged him to accept honorary degrees. Scientists who had called him a fraud now wrote papers praising his groundbreaking work. Politicians and corporate leaders offered him positions of power and influence. Danny turned most of them down. He did accept a position at the newly formed Research Institute, a global organization dedicated to studying the archive and sharing its contents with the rest of the universe. But he refused to become its director, preferring instead to work as an advisor and translator. He had spent 30 years learning to be invisible, and he found that he did not want to stop. His main focus was on the stories. While other teams worked to understand the scientific and technological treasures in the archive, Danny spent his days reading the records of them themselves. He learned their names, their histories, their hopes and fears. He came to know them as individuals, not just as ancient beings of power, but as people who had loved and struggled and made mistakes just like everyone else. He wrote about them, books and articles and documentaries, all aimed at helping ordinary people understand who they had been and what they had tried to accomplish. He wanted the whole universe to know their names, to remember them the way they deserved to be remembered. Some critics accused him of being obsessed. Others said he was wasting his time on history when he could be helping with more practical matters. Danny did not care. He had made a promise to a dying dragon, and he intended to keep it. Years passed. The knowledge from the archive transformed human civilization and spread to dozens of other species. New technologies emerged that made faster-than-light travel cheaper and easier. Medical breakthroughs extended and cured diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted as species that had been weak became strong, and old empires learned to share their dominance. Through it all, Danny kept writing. He kept translating. He kept telling the stories of to anyone who would listen. On the 20th anniversary of the discovery, Danny returned to Epsilon 7 for a ceremony honoring the place where it had all begun. The mining station had been converted into a museum, dedicated to and the other Guardians. Thousands of visitors came every year to see the spot where a janitor had spoken to a dragon. Danny stood at the window of the observation deck, looking out at the stars. He was 73 years old now, with white hair and a face lined with age. But his eyes were bright, and his mind was sharp, and his heart was full of gratitude for the strange turn his life had taken. A young girl approached him, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with curious eyes and a data tablet clutched in her hands. "Are you the Dragon Man?" she asked. Danny smiled. "Some people call me that." "My teacher says you talk to a real dragon. Is that true?" "It is true," Danny said. He was very old and very wise, and he wanted to give humanity a gift before he died. The girl's eyes went wide. "What kind of gift?" Danny knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Knowledge," he said. "Stories, the names of all his friends and family who lived a long time ago. He wanted us to remember them." "Why?" Danny thought about that question for a moment before answering. "Because being remembered is important," he said. "When someone remembers your name and tells your story, a little piece of you stays alive forever. Wanted his people to live on in our memories, even after they were gone." The girl considered this carefully. "I am going to remember him," she said finally. "The Eternal. I am going to tell all my friends." Danny felt tears in his eyes, the same tears he had felt 20 years ago when an ancient dragon had thanked him for not forgetting. "That is exactly what he would have wanted," Danny said. He stood up and looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, scattered across the cosmos, the energy of the eternal drifted through the void. The dragon was gone, but he was not forgotten. He would never be forgotten, not as long as there were people willing to speak his name and tell his story. Danny had started his life as a promising scholar, had spent 30 years as a forgotten janitor, and had ended up as the keeper of 800 million years of memory. It was not the path he had expected, but it was the path he had been given, and he would not trade it for anything. They had watched over the universe for countless ages, hoping that the young species they protected would grow into something wonderful. Danny liked to think they would have been proud of what humanity was becoming, and he liked to think that somewhere, in whatever lay beyond the boundaries of space and time, was finally at peace. The old dragon had come looking for someone who remembered. He had found a janitor, and that janitor had kept his promise. That was the end of the story, and the beginning of a new one.